If you're applying for disability benefits or help people that are, the path to success has never been more complicated. Welcome to the Disability Expert Podcast, where we tackle the difficult issues and interview the country's top experts to help you better navigate the disability process. Winning a disability case is hard and keeps getting tougher every day. We can't promise you'll win your case by listening, but we sure think it's going to help.
This really isn't that complicated. I mean, you want to win your case, don't you? Well, then listen to what I say.
Hi, so welcome to the Disability Expert Podcast. I'm Chad Brown. I'm your host. I'm so excited today to have David Lund as my guest. Dave, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
As you know, every week we interview some of the best disability experts in the country, and this week is no exception. David Lund been a disability primarily practicing lawyer for over 20 years, North Carolina board certified Social Security disability law specialist, started with sort of a larger national firm and, really traveled all over the country, did thousands of hearings, moved a little more regional, worked for a big regional firm in North Carolina for about 9 years, where he helped not only build, but ran their entire disability division. In 2020, he founded his own firm, Lund Law Carolina, where they work exclusively with Social Security disability claimants. Known David a long time, pre-COVID, when we used to do hearings all the time. We'd sit in the waiting rooms, many conversations about everything from whether the judge was in a good mood that day or not, to whether our clients were actually going to show up. David, so thank you so much for being here. Good to see you. Talk about this with a lot of my guests. How did you get in the disability space? But more importantly, why are you still there? It's a tough space to be in. There's somewhat more lucrative spaces we could all probably be in, but you've been there for over 20 years. How'd you get in the disability world, and why are you still there?
I was one of those who came out of law school and didn't really have enough of a clue about what I really wanted to do. But I had been in a clinic that was an administrative law clinic, somewhat related to the types of hearings that we go through with disability claims. And as I was applying for jobs right out of school, that one of the practices that I got in with was all Social Security disability, and I found it fit. It just, I had no preconceived notions about it. I really didn't know anything about it at all as I started. And I felt like the kind of client interactions that we get fit my personality. The interactions with Social Security and with judges worked for me. It's not quite as contentious as some areas of law, and I like the collaborative nature of it that you get when you get a good judge, and when you're trying to build your case. So here I am. It's been 24 years now.
Oh, wow. It's funny. Like my highest grade in law school was administrative law. And honestly, when I was in law school, even though I made the highest grade in that class, I still don't think I had any idea what it was actually about. And yet here we are, right in the middle of federal administrative practice all day long, every day. So, one of the things that, and we talked a little bit before the show about some of the issues that you could bring to the show and help with people. One of the things that you talked about were there are a lot of, in this sort of world of disinformation or misinformation or whatever you want to talk about. I mean, that's been the case in the disability space for a long time, especially from the client standpoint. So what I want to do today, if we can, is I want to go through some of these myths, some of this bad information that people have, misunderstandings, misconceptions people have about the process, so that, when clients are coming in the process and they're going through it, because it can be frustrating. It's great when you have a good collaboration with a good judge, but as well as I do, sometimes that's not how it works out. The first thing I think people get confused about a lot of times, I know in our conversations over the years, is what actually is disability. So, just briefly, what is disability in the Social Security context? Right. What are you doing every day?
Yeah. I mean, I think, that is really step number one with my clients is, hey, if you want to be successful in this, let's understand what you're actually trying to do. And this is, in the most general sense, a medical condition or conditions that have prevented you from performing any kind of job at all for at least a period of 12 months, or ultimately could really result in death. But I think what people get hung up on, number one, is certainly, well, I can't do that job I've been doing for the last 15 years. Okay. Very good, but that's not what Social Security is set up for. Or, I have this certain diagnosis and I saw on the website that qualifies you for disability. Well, okay, but is it disabling to you is a different question. And so those are some of the things we try and clean up straight away with our clients, and make sure they know what the ultimate goal is, or maybe just to point them in the right direction that this isn't for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we see, certainly in our practice, we see it sort of err on both sides too. You see people who sort of like, well, I'm not disabled because I'm not wheelchair bound, or I'm not a parent. So they actually are disabled, but they don't realize that
Sure.
the
Yeah.
standard is lower than they think. And then obviously, like you talk about on the other side, you have people who sort of have this idea, well, my doctor says I'm disabled, or I can't do the job I used to do. I don't see what else I could do. How else could I ever possibly work? And so I think that's really important that they get that clear at the very beginning.
And I see both ends of the spectrum regularly. I just had a really gratifying case that was approved that actually was a mother of a friend of ours who had been out of work for going on 8 years at that point, and her kids had kept saying, you qualify for this. You're disabled, and yet she didn't make that emotional leap or decide that it was something that she wanted to pursue until about a year ago. And we were able to get that case approved, which really felt good. She had pretty extreme difficulties for a long time, and yet I don't think kind of understood where that fit into all this.
I think it's real common for clients to come in. They don't actually understand what's there. What they know is that they're not able to maybe be the person they used to be in the workforce, and so they're trying to figure out how to navigate it.
Sure.
Which leads to another. Let's just talk about some of these myths, because there's some myths out there that we hear every day, very much related in some respects to what being disabled means. So let's talk about this. My neighbor got it in a month. I know a guy who got paid down, he didn't have to do anything. I know Susie at church, and she's in the choir, and she said that she can't believe I. So how do you deal with this? Well, somebody else got paid. I don't understand why I can't. And the underlying assumption, though, is always the person making the statement, the client, always believes they're way more disabled, physically or emotionally than the other person. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, I try and tell folks from the beginning, like, your case and someone else's cases are not the same case. Even if you have the same medical condition, you probably go to different doctors. You probably have had different testing done. You probably aren't the same age, or, may not have done the same kind of work in the past. Your memory is probably a little faulty on how long it actually took to get it done. It seemed fast, but oh wait, actually that was 9 months that went by for that. Or
Sure.
I just think people aren't as aware of what's going on in their neighbors' houses as they think they are.
Yeah, I mean, and I sort of see two other issues there too that come up a lot. One is, like, not only do you not know what's going on in their house, you don't know what's going on with their person. You don't know what's going on with their mental health. You don't know what, everyone doesn't look disabled. There's being,
For sure.
And what interesting love. I'm pretty hard on ALJs over the years, but I do think most of them get that part right. Like, they don't really look at people and say, they don't sort of have that casual observer look about disability. I think the ALJ by and large is going to get into those details, and it's getting your client to understand it's in those details where the disability is going to be found. And we need to focus on your details, not the details of the guy down the street.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Similar question we get is, well, so-and-so's a drug addict. I know so-and-so down the road, and he's getting drunk every night. Why can he get it and I can't? How do you deal with that?
It's a factor, but ultimately, Social Security does have a test for this, and as you know, is that drug or alcoholism a material factor to the disability? If I've got a bad back, does it matter whether I'm drinking all day long? Probably not. It's not good for you. Or has the damage been done? So years ago, I had a client who had very severe liver disease, all caused by alcoholism. But at a certain point, the damage was done and he wasn't going to recover. And so he was able to get approved. So yes, there is drug or alcohol use. Is it material to that question of whether or not you can work is the underlying question. And for folks who are getting it, generally it's not material. It's just a factor, it's out there, but
Yeah, I mean, I think we used to. This is a somewhat crude example, but we used. It seemed like I don't have as many now. It seemed like when 20 years ago, I had more vets who were actually in Vietnam, and a lot of them, had a back problem or whatever, and they used uppers in the morning. Sometimes they used cocaine, they used alcohol. A lot of times they were recovering with severe mental health problems, and then they'd hurt their back. And I remember, vividly used to trying to explain to staff, like, look, theoretically, you could be a crack addict. It's got nothing to do with whether your back's hurt or not, right? And so you have to understand there is a separation going on there.
For sure.
Yeah.
And, I guess the message there for folks is that they're not getting paid because of that addiction issue. They're getting paid because of something else.
And if they are getting paid because of the addiction issue, you made a great point there where, when you reach the point where maybe you have we actually had a client recently in the past couple of weeks had alcohol-induced dementia. And when you reach the point where you have alcohol-induced dementia, it really doesn't matter if you keep drinking or not. Similar to COPD with smoking, even though I don't like fighting that fight, but it's similar. Once the damage is done and irreversible, then that can be a cause, even if you continue to use. So,
absolutely.
So how about the related question of the neighbor who has disability who works all the time? How about that case? So-and-so's got it, and I see them out working every day. So how do you deal with that objection?
I think the real bottom line in this is that there is less fraud in the disability world than people have been led to believe. And yes, there are some people who work and get disability, and there's a structure for that with Social Security, and whether it's working on a limited basis under what we call substantial gainful activity. 2025, the standard would be $1,620 a month before taxes. You can stay under that limit and work. And many people do. A lot of my clients are sort of trying to make their way through this space and not be on the streets, and so that's where they are. Or folks who have been approved for disability and decide, hey, I want to try and work. And so they go through and use the trial work period that Social Security has in place. And that's a 9-month period where they can go out and attempt to work and not necessarily lose access to the benefits that they have. So there are a couple of different things that may be going on there. I'm sure there are people who are working under the table and that sort of thing. But I think it's probably more limited than what people view, and not knowing what money's coming in the door and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think one of the things too that you have to understand is, but we get back to this definition of disability. Being disabled doesn't mean you can't do anything at all, and ultimately that does mean there are provisions that allow you to work. So, related question: let's say you have a client or you have someone who's on disability and they're considering going back to work. How do you generally handle that situation in terms of, my big thing is I get mad when they don't call me, like I always find out after the fact. So someone has enough foresight to call you and says, hey, I'm on disabled, you got them on disability or somebody else, and they come to you and say, hey, I'm thinking about going back to work. And how do you advise those folks?
First things first, hey, I'm so glad that you have this opportunity, whether it's your health has improved or, the right opportunity is there. You're going to make more money working than you are on disability. So great. Here are the things that Social Security is going to look at. Always advise them first off about that substantial gainful activity level, certainly about the trial work period that's allowed, ways that they can sort of make these a transition either back into work or that attempt to work and not set themselves back entirely. So the conversation usually revolves around those two things, and making sure that you keep your documentation, don't lose your pay stubs, make sure you know how much you're working, so that when you need to report it to Social Security, it doesn't cause you an issue down the road.
Yeah, for sure. So one other myth I want to hit, which is a little bit political, sort of at this point, is this issue of, one of the issues we get a lot are people come in and usually they're calling. I don't know. They don't want to see me make it into the office with this complaint, but they're on the phone with my staff complaining about illegal immigrants and illegal immigrants drawing benefits.
Sure.
Tell people about that. Is that really a thing, or how does that really work?
So it's not really a thing. It's, but I do get those calls also. And I know that what happens is my clients were prospective clients, people who have been denied. are in sort of the worst space that they can be in. And so all the bad thoughts come out. But, we're not out there paying illegal immigrants to receive disability benefits. There are primarily two types of claims that you're going to file. One is based on what you work and pay into the Social Security system for. And so we know if you're in that space that you're a well-documented person here, whether you came in as a foreign worker or you are a permanent resident or whatever the situation might be. If we're looking at SSI, which is, of course, a needs-based benefit, and that's, I think, what most people are thinking about, you're not going to get on SSI as an illegal immigrant. We're all tagged to a Social Security number, even under SSI. It's the documentation you're going to have to provide to Social Security to prove who you are and where you are and all those kinds of things is important. Now, I think where this sort of comes from is there are programs that allow people as refugees to get some benefits from Social Security, totally separate from disability. Has nothing to do with whether or not somebody's going to get their benefits or anything like that. But that's just assisting people who are coming to the United States under threat from their homeland and allowing them to an opportunity to kind of find their way into the United States in a legal fashion. So
sure. Yeah. Well, I want to ask a couple of more specific issues about issues that come up that get people there. But before we do that, I want to take a quick word from our sponsor, CBIG.
Hey there, this is Kevin Rosenquist from the Disability Expert Podcast. Every week, Chad and his guests discuss the disability process and how expert attorneys help their clients obtain the Social Security disability benefits they deserve. But obtaining disability benefits is only half the battle. After winning your disability case, understanding Medicare should be your top priority, and that's where CBIG comes in. Disabled individuals must get their Medicare coverage right. Trying to understand Medicare can cause anxiety, uncertainty, and even fear. CBIG works with Medicare beneficiaries on disability around the country and is committed to helping those on disability navigate the complex Medicare process. Visit cbigcares.com today to see how CBIG makes Medicare simplified. Mention this ad and receive a free gift when you schedule a 10-minute consultation.
Okay, well, we're back. And we've been talking about, with David Lund, we've been talking about myths that come up in the process that he's hearing from his clients, and we all hear from our clients on a daily basis, trying to put those aside. But there's one I really want to spend a little time with here at the end. And this is this question of, my doctor says I can't work, why don't I get approved? And I think that's as much as we kind of laugh at some of these other questions that come up that we have to deal with to try to get people focus on your own case, just focus on your own life, because that's all we can help them with, right? This is a real question. And this is an issue I think that's really frustrating for the clients. Talk about that. What is the scenario where, their doctor thinks they're disabled? What seem to be some of the issues there? How do we reconcile those in our claims? How does your staff and people that are working with you, working with your clients, actually leverage this really valuable evidence so that it does actually lead to them getting approved?
Yeah. And this is, I think, for me, the big piece of building a case is, yes, your doctor may say that. In most instances, probably didn't write it in their records. The conversations that go on in those examination rooms are clearly very different than what ends up on these these sheets that we get from people for their records. But, I get a lot from folks. Have you even talked to your doctor about work restrictions, or do they think you can work, or do they support your disability claim? It's shocking how many people will apply for this and never have discussed it with their doctor. The second piece to that is, making sure after you have that conversation, how do we document that? And some of that can be done through, there are forms that we might have them complete, or, maybe they can write a letter and tell us a little bit more about, what they're seeing, as opposed to just, I took your blood pressure, I took your weight, and I refilled your medications, which is what a lot of those medical records will end up saying. And, that helps sort of put in perspective what we're seeing through the overall record. and is really an important piece of getting a disability claim approved. Now, beyond that, and I think that what people come back to is my doctor wrote this statement for me, and it's one line: I am disabled, and Social Security is going to reject that right out of hand. And so we try and get specific about the kinds of things that they're dealing with. Do you have a lifting restriction? Does your doctor think you can only work a certain number of hours or a certain number of days, or whatever the particular impairment might lead to? Trying to get as specific and in the language that Social Security likes to have, as opposed to just trying to say I'm disabled, which, as you know, Social Security will say, well, that's an issue that we're going to figure out, not what your doctor is going to say.
For the commissioner.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I miss the days of the treating physician rule, which allowed doctors to just sort of, here's the opinion. Okay, we have to take it. And
I mean, I think with our clients in this issue, one of the things is, I think you're right. I think initially, a lot of times there hasn't been a conversation. Their doctor, it's amazing to me how many of my clients are like afraid of their doctors. Mm-hmm. Like they see them in this sort of high position where like, I don't even know if I could ask them. That's not all of our clients. Some of our clients, like, the doctor's calling us going, will you please tell me what to do? So they'll quit calling. But that's probably not the most common. I mean, right. more of my clients, I would say, are probably in some respect afraid, or they're concerned, or they don't know. They're just insecure. They're anxious about it because there's a lot at stake. I do think it's important, though, that they, when you have that specific set of questions, though, that you're doing what you're doing, which is, how do we build the case? And this is a central piece of our case that we're going to build when we actually have it. So we are running short on time, but there's one final thing that I want to get out there, and I don't know. Who knows? Maybe this will get put on the editing floor right there. One of the concerns and things we get in our office sometimes is people get frustrated. They get mad, and I think this is important in this time in history as we look at possibly there being more delays. Obviously, I think we're rapidly approaching a time where there may be more delays in the process, and I'm not the only one speculating that. And we get that pushback that says the only reason you're delaying is so that you make more money, because we are paid contingent fees. So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that objection to ease your clients, sort of give them peace of mind? Look, this is not why we're not increasing the delay.
I think a couple of things. One, there's a cap on the fee. So at a certain point, it doesn't help me or you or any attorney to have a case keep going. My number one goal would be to get it approved as early as possible. I'll take a small fee for a case that didn't take forever versus a limited fee at the end over something that I worked on for 5 years. And I think making sure folks that understand that the more time I have to spend on it, it's less good, let's get it done early.
Yeah. I think one of the things too, and I don't want to get into deep, the financials of running a disability law firm, but I don't think people realize that, like, financially, from the lawyer's perspective, even though the fee is smaller, a lot of times the cost to administer and handle that claim, while it's more substantial than people think, is actually less. And so you can make an argument. I mean, I would make an argument that we would be better off handling all cases almost as quickly as possible rather than delaying them. So, sure. But unfortunately, I think those objections are coming, and they come out of frustration. And so I think sometimes it's about meeting people where they are. And I know just from knowing you a long time, I know you guys do that. Quickly before we go, website where people can find you. If they're in the show, I mean, you're all North Carolina and South Carolina, but out of the Charlotte area, website where people can find you if they're looking for a good rep to help them with their disability.
www.lundlawcarolina.com. That's LUNDLAW. All those L's are hard to get out sometimes.
We'll stick it in the show notes so they can find you through the show. David, thanks again. Great seeing you again. Thank you for being on the show. I appreciate your time and insight. And there's some political issues we had on our agenda maybe to possibly talk about. So maybe down the road we'll see how DOJ works and where we end up, and maybe we'll get you back to some of those. Well, that'll do it. That's another wrap. That's another wrap for the Disability Expert Podcast. Please hit subscribe, and we will be back next week with one of the country's best experts. Thanks.